I still recall the exact second my life seemed to split apart. The phone on my office desk buzzed just once before I answered it. A steady, formal voice said, "Ms. Walsh, this is Mr. Davies. I'm an attorney for Robert Reed. He is very ill and he's asking to see you." I felt a complete stillness come over me. The normal afternoon sounds of keyboards typing and phones ringing in the open plan office just seemed to dissolve. "I'm sorry," I managed to say. "I think you have the wrong number." He paused for a beat. "He said you would likely say that." That was the moment something deep inside me, something I hadn't even known was there, felt like it shifted. It was like a door I'd never seen before suddenly rattled in its frame. For the rest of the afternoon, I just looked at the engineering blueprints on my screen. Outside my Chicago office window, the traffic on the street below moved in its usual pattern. Everything about the day was completely normal except for the words that kept playing over and over in my head. "He is very ill. He's asking to see you." I had lived my entire life with the understanding that I was on my own. The state file said I was relinquished at birth. I never bothered to question it. I grew up in a group home in the city, moved between a few foster families, and got a scholarship to college the first chance I got. My career became my family. Deadlines and projects took the place of a personal life. But now a stranger's call was claiming a man I'd never heard of, a man I knew from business magazines was incredibly powerful, was my father. I tried to reason with myself that it was a mistake. There must be thousands of Walshes in the country and plenty of lawyers trying to find relatives. But the specific way he had said my full name, Anna Reed Walsh, made my skin feel cold. That evening, I couldn't rest. I made a cup of tea and sat on the sofa in my quiet apartment, staring at an old shoebox I keep in the back of my closet. Inside were the few things I had from my childhood: a hospital bracelet with my name, a very faded photo of a man in a dark suit holding a baby, and a small, cheap plastic bracelet. On the back of the picture, someone had written in faded ink, "4ARW, always safe." My initials, Reed. I ran my thumb over the photo, feeling the crease. I had always assumed it was just a random item, maybe belonging to another child at the home, but now it felt like a clue and a mystery I never knew I was part of. By the next morning, I had decided. The lawyer's number was still in my phone's call history. "Mr. Davies," I said when he picked up. "I was hoping you'd call, Ms. Walsh," he replied. "Mr. Reed doesn't have a lot of time." "I don't know what he expects from me," I said. "I don't know this man." His voice seemed to get a little softer. "He knows you, ma'am. He has followed your entire career. He said you would understand when you saw the house." "The house?" I asked. "The Reed estate in upstate New York. Can you come today?" I looked around my empty kitchen. No family photos on the walls, no one to say goodbye to. Just my work schedule stuck to the refrigerator. "Yes," I said at last, I can come." The flight to New York was smooth, but my mind was turbulent. I kept going over everything I thought I knew about my life. My job taught me to be logical, to focus on data, to keep emotions separate, but this was something I couldn't organize into a spreadsheet. I remembered being 12 watching a news segment about a new skyscraper opening. The chief engineer, a woman, was cutting a ribbon. I'd stood right in front of the common room television and felt a strange sense of purpose. I always wondered why that moment stuck with me, why it felt so important. Now I wondered if it was just a random memory after all. When I arrived, a driver was waiting, a man in a simple black car holding a sign that just said, "Walsh." He was quiet during the drive, which I was grateful for. The drive took us out of the city, and the scenery gradually changed from skyscrapers to wide lawns and enormous houses hidden behind trees. Finally, we turned down a long, private road. At the end was a massive stone house, the kind you see in old movies, with tall gates and a feeling of old, quiet money. Mr. Davies met me at the front door. He looked tired. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Walsh," he said, shaking my hand. "He's upstairs. He's very weak." "I'm only here to find out what's going on," I replied. He nodded as if he knew that. "I understand, but before you go up, there's something you should see." He led me down a wide hallway. The walls were covered in paintings. When we stopped in front of one, I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was me. Not just someone who looked like me. It was me, in a painting. I was standing on a stage at a podium, a picture taken from a trade conference I spoke at last year. The artist had captured it exactly. "Where did this come from?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Mr. Reed commissioned it," Davies said. "He said it was for his daughter." My heart was pounding. This doesn't prove anything." "Of course not," he said gently. "But maybe what's upstairs will." He showed me the way up a large staircase. The house was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of a clock and the hum of what sounded like medical equipment. A nurse nodded at us as we went into a large bedroom that smelled like old books and medicine. In the bed was a very old man, his skin pale and thin. His eyes, though, were still sharp. His chest barely moved when he breathed. When he saw me, he tried to lift his head. I should have said something, but I was frozen. His voice was scratchy and weak. "You have your mother's eyes." The room felt like it was spinning. I wanted to yell, to ask for proof, but all I could say was, "Why?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Because you were safer not knowing." He started to cough, a deep, painful sound. The nurse came closer, but he waved her away. "Please, stay," he whispered. I took one small step closer. "You can't just show up after all these years and expect—" He lifted a hand that was trembling. "I didn't just show up. I watched every step, every project, every success." Anger suddenly pushed past the confusion. "You watched? You watched while I grew up by myself." His hand fell back. "It was the only way I could keep you alive." I turned away from him. "You should have let me take my chances." The machines beeped. He closed his eyes, looking worn out. Davies put a hand on my arm. "Maybe it's best to let him rest. He needs to recover his strength before he can explain." I didn't say anything. I just walked out of the room. Downstairs, the lawyer gave me a sealed envelope. "He wanted me to give you this," he said, "Asi, only if you came." I didn't take it at first. My hands were shaking. Finally, I just put it in my coat pocket. Outside, the sun was starting to set. The large front lawn was perfectly quiet. For the first time since I was a child, I felt completely lost, like the foundation of my whole life was crumbling. In the distance, I heard a church bell ring, faint and slow. I looked back at the huge house, the home of a man who might be my father, and I whispered to myself, what if everything I built my life on was a lie? The Reed estate didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum, a place where things were kept perfectly preserved in silence. The car's tires crunched on the gravel as we pulled up. I wondered for a second if I was dreaming. The gates opened without a sound. Beyond them, the house seemed to be watching, its windows dark. It was huge, but it didn't feel welcoming. It had the kind of stillness that comes when all the important things have already happened a long time ago. Mr. Davies was waiting for me, a small man in a dark suit. When he saw me get out of the car, he gave a small, sad smile. "Ms. Walsh," he said. "Or perhaps I should say, Ms. Reed." "Let's not jump to conclusions," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here for facts, not a family reunion." He nodded as if he'd expected me to say that. "Of course, please follow me." Inside, the air smelled like furniture polish and something medicinal. Portraits of serious-looking people in old-fashioned clothes lined the walls. Generations of Reeds, probably. All of them looked proud and distant. I tried not to look at them. Then we turned a corner, and I stopped. There, hanging above a long wooden table, was a large oil painting. The light from a tall window shined right on it. It was me. I was wearing the dark blue suit I'd bought for my first big presentation, standing beside a model of a bridge I had designed. The painting was so real it was almost scary. The artist had even included the small scar above my eyebrow, which I'd gotten from falling off a bike when I was a kid. My throat felt tight. "Who painted this?" "An artist from New York," Davies said. "Mr. Reed hired him. He said he wanted to see his daughter the way he pictured her." I just stared at the painting. "So he's been watching me." "Observing, I think," the lawyer said gently, but not spying." I didn't answer. I just kept walking toward the stairs. Upstairs, the nurse opened the bedroom door. The room was filled with the sound of quiet machines. An oxygen machine, a heart monitor, the sounds of a life ending. Robert Reed was lying on the bed. He looked small, but his presence still seemed to fill the room. A dark business suit was hanging neatly on a chair nearby, as if he expected to get up and go to a meeting. When he turned his head, his eyes met mine. They were clear and intelligent. "Anna," he whispered. "You came." I froze when he said my name. He said it like he had been saying it for years. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came to find out the truth." He tried to smile. "The truth," he said, "is a heavy thing to carry, Anna. Are you sure you want it?" I clenched my hands. "Try me." He motioned to a chair by the bed. I didn't take it. I just stood there, my arms crossed. "I know you're angry," he said. "You have every right to be." "Angry?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You left me in a group home and built a shrine to your guilt." He coughed, but he didn't look away. "You think I didn't want to bring you back the world I lived in? It wasn't safe for a child. You could have told me later. You could have come for me when the danger was gone." The danger never really went away. The nurse quietly checked his pulse and then left us alone. Davies stood by the door, his hands folded, just listening. "Your mother wanted you to have a normal life," he went on. "When the threat started, we had to make you disappear. It was the only way." I shook my head. Making a person disappear doesn't protect them. It just makes them invisible. His eyes looked sad. "You survived. You became everything I hoped you would be." I didn't want to hear that. It sounded like he was praising himself. I stepped a little closer, close enough to see the lines on his face, the way his hands shook. "Do you have any idea what it's like?" I said quietly. "To grow up thinking you're nobody? To build your whole life from scratch, and then find out you were just someone's secret?" He swallowed, and it looked painful. "Every award you won, every project you finished, I kept track. I was so proud." "Pride doesn't mean anything when it's hidden." He tried to reach for my hand, but he was too weak. His arm fell back onto the bed. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I thought I was saving you." I turned away so he wouldn't see my eyes. "Maybe you were just saving yourself." Outside the bedroom, I stood by a window, watching the trees on the lawn. The air smelled like old rain. Davies came up beside me. "He doesn't have much time," he said. "A few days, maybe." "I'm not ready for this," I said. I don't even know what to call him. "Maybe just Sir for now. This, he suggested. He handed me a small cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax. My name was written on it in strong, neat handwriting. "He wrote this a long time ago," Davies explained. "He said to give it to you when you came home." I stared at the envelope but didn't open it. I wasn't sure I could handle any more truth today. Before I left, I found myself walking into his study. It was filled with books, maps, and business awards. On his desk, there was a photo of a young woman smiling. Her eyes were the same shape as mine, my mother. There was also a second photo, me at a worksite wearing a hard hat, shaking hands with a city official. It looked like it had been printed from an online news article. Someone had put it in a nice silver frame. That's when I realized this man had built his life around a memory, and now he wanted me to be real. I left the study and closed the door. As I walked to the front door, I heard thunder in the distance. A storm was coming. I turned to Davies. "If I don't come back," I said, "make sure he knows I got his letter." He looked at me with sad eyes. "He already knows, Anna." The driver opened the car door for me, but I paused. I looked back at the big stone house, its windows like tired eyes. For just a second, I felt a little bit of sympathy. Maybe because I saw myself in him, focused, alone, and full of things left unsaid. But then I remembered all the birthdays I spent alone, all the nights I wondered who I was, and the sympathy disappeared. I got in the car. The rain started to fall as we drove away, making streaks on the window. Somewhere in that house, a dying man was thinking of me, but I didn't look back. The envelope was on the nightstand in my hotel room. I stared at it for 2 hours. Every part of my logical mind told me to ignore it, to stay in control. But this wasn't a project I could manage. Finally, close to midnight, I opened it. Inside were 4 things: a folded letter, a birth certificate, a faded photograph, and a stock certificate. The birth certificate said, Anna Grace Reed, born at a private hospital in New York. Parents, Robert A. Reed and Laura E. Reed. I just looked at my name. It wasn't Walsh, the name I'd been given. It was Reed. The photograph was next, a young, smiling Robert Reed in a suit holding a baby. Beside him was a woman with kind eyes, my mother. She was looking at the baby, not the camera. The stock certificate was for a small, now successful tech company, dated the same day I started my first internship. The letter was written in strong, clear handwriting. Anna, if you are reading this, I've run out of time. The world I lived in was complicated. After your mother's death, threats were made against me, real ones, from dangerous people I had crossed in business. I believed the only way to keep you alive was to hide you, even from me. I watched your career, every promotion, every project I knew. You carried the name I couldn't give you, but you earned the success I could never take away. Forgive me, if you can. Robert Reed. My hands were shaking. I wanted to rip the letter up, but instead I folded it. I felt angry and sad all at once, which was a new feeling for me. The next morning, I met Davies in the hotel coffee shop. He was already there, drinking black coffee. You read it? He asked. I did. I just stared and into my own cup. He's either the most dedicated liar in the world or the loneliest man I've ever heard of. Davies sighed. I understand why you're angry, but the threats he mentioned, they were real. He slid a thin file across the table. Inside were old, yellowed newspaper clippings. The headlines were all about a brutal corporate battle, anonymous threats, and federal investigations. One paragraph stood out. Following the hostile takeover, sources close to the Reed family reported threats against his dependents. A protective relocation was advised. A classified event was staged to protect the minor child. I looked up at him. You're saying my death was faked? He nodded. The child listed was Anna Grace Reed. The death certificate was faked. Only 3 people knew: your father, his lawyer, and the head of his security. And my mother? She knew. She agreed until she didn't. She died 2 months later in a car accident. After that, Mr. Reed never spoke of it again. The coffee shop felt like it was shrinking. All those years I thought my parents had just abandoned me, but the truth was they had buried me. Davies continued. He tried to adopt you back once he thought the threat was gone. The agency refused. By then, your records were sealed. The only way he could stay close was from a distance. I pushed the file back. You make it sound like he was a hero. It wasn't heroic, Davies said. It was desperate, but it came from love, Anna. Love. That word felt wrong. Love doesn't leave you in a group home with secondhand clothes. Love doesn't make you build your entire life on your own. Back in my room, I sat on the floor with all the papers. I spread them out like pieces of a puzzle. Birth certificate, photo, letter. It was proof, but it didn't give me peace. I needed to hear him say it himself. No more letters, no more lawyers. I called Davies. Tell Mr. Reed I'm coming back. He paused. He's weaker today, Anna. You might not get the big fight you're looking for. Then I'll just take the answers. The drive back to the house was quiet. The rain was gone. When I saw the gates, I felt my chest tighten. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was determination. Inside, the nurse met me. He's been waiting, she said. I walked straight upstairs. He was awake, propped up on pillows. His breathing was shallow. He looked smaller. You left me with nothing, I said, standing at the end of his bed. He looked at me, not surprised, just tired. I left you with your life, he said, as in, it was all I had to give. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. I pulled the birth certificate from my pocket and threw it on the bed. Was any of it worth it? He looked at the paper, then at me. Every day since, I've asked myself that same question. I wanted to yell. Instead, I whispered, "You watched me get my first job, didn't you?" "Yes." "And you did nothing." "I tried to help quietly." "You never needed it. You were stronger than I was." "I was stronger because I had to be." His eyes watered, but he didn't cry. "You have her fire." "Your mother." I hesitated. "What was she like?" "Kind," he said. "Too kind for the world I moved in. She believed people could be saved. I only knew how to win." Something inside me softened, just a little. For the first time, I noticed the photo of her on his nightstand, next to my plastic bracelet from the orphanage. He reached for the bracelet, his fingers shaking. "Your mother made me promise to give this back when it was safe." He handed it to me. Tucked inside the plastic band was a tiny folded piece of paper, yellow with age. "For AGR, always safe." The same words from the photo. The handwriting matched his. That night, I sat in the study downstairs. Rain was tapping on the windows. On his desk, I found binders lined up by year. Walsh, AG, my performance reviews, photos from projects, newspaper clippings, commendations, all carefully filed. Every step of my career documented by a man I thought was a stranger. I turned a page and saw a blurry photo of me at a city council meeting. In the background, barely visible, was an older man in a hat watching. He had been there. I leaned back in the chair, feeling exhausted. I didn't know what to feel. Hate needed distance. Love needed understanding. I was stuck in the middle. As I closed the binder, I whispered, "You hid me to protect me, but maybe you just didn't trust me to be strong enough." Upstairs, I could hear the beep of his heart monitor. I didn't know if I wanted it to stop or to go on forever. The house was even quieter when I returned 2 days later. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy. The nurse met me with a sad look. "He's resting. You can see him." "Not yet," I said. "There's something I need to do." I went back to the study. The door was cold. I turned the knob. The room smelled like old paper, leather, and dust. The binders were all there. 2004, 2005, 2006. My whole life on a shelf. At the far end of the room, on his desk, was a file folder. Confidential materials. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were copies of my own professional evaluations, project reports, and commendations. Every single one had notes written in the margins in pencil. Excellent leadership under pressure. She refuses to give up. Reminds me of Laura when she argued with the board. She's still wearing the bracelet. She doesn't know. I sat down in his chair. My father hadn't just followed my career, he had studied it. A drawer on the right was locked. I found the key under a photo frame. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. All of them had never been mailed. The first one was from 1995. "I saw your school. Picture in the local paper. You'd lost a front tooth. I wish your mother could see you. I hope someday you'll understand why I had to disappear. I was still proud." Another letter. "I've started a fund in your name, scholarships for foster children who want to go into engineering. Maybe one of them will understand." By the fifth letter, my eyes were burning. He had written to me for 30 years and never sent a single one. There was a small box behind the letters. I opened it and found a heavy gold medallion, an old business award engraved with his name. Underneath it was a note. "For her, when she's ready." I didn't know what to feel. He had spent his life trying to give me protection, pride, and an apology. All I ever wanted was a father. I heard footsteps. Mr. Davies was at the door, his face pale. "He's asking for you," he said. "I think it might be time." I followed him upstairs. The sound of the monitors was weaker. When I went into the room, Robert Reed was awake, but just barely. The nurse moved away. His voice was a whisper. "You found the study." I nodded. "You kept everything." He tried to smile. "It was all I had left of you." I sat by the bed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. He looked at the window. "Because every time I thought about it, the past stopped me. The business, the danger, the fear that someone would find you." I looked at his face, seeing the same stubborn lines I had in my own. "You could have trusted me," I said. "I'm not a child anymore." His eyes softened. "No, you're the woman I raised without ever being in the room." We were quiet for a long time. The machine beeped, a slow rhythm. Then he whispered, "Your mother. She wanted peace. I only gave her protection." "She loved you?" I asked. He nodded. "Enough to forgive me. I hope you can too." He reached for the plastic bracelet on the nightstand. His hands were shaking as he put it in mine. "She said this would lead you home someday." I stared at the cheap piece of plastic. "I don't even know what home means," I whispered. "Neither did I," he said. "Not until now." His breathing was getting shallow. "Tell me something," he murmured. "When you finish a project, do you still feel proud?" "Yes, sir," I said softly. "Always." He smiled. "Then I did one thing right." The monitor beeped, then beeped again, irregularly. He whispered something, but I couldn't hear it. I leaned closer. I watched every ceremony, every handshake. I was there, even when you didn't see me. My throat felt tight. "Why didn't you ever let me see you?" He smiled, a tiny, faint smile. "Because the moment you did, you wouldn't have needed me anymore." The monitor made a long, flat sound. The nurse moved forward, checking for a pulse, but I already knew. Robert Reed, my father, the stranger, was gone. Davies put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Anna." I nodded, my eyes on the man in the bed. "I spent my life chasing promotions," I said, but I never realized my biggest project was just learning the truth." Davies handed me a heavy wool blanket from the end of the bed. "He asked that you have this," he said. "He said you earned it." I took the blanket. It was heavy, like it held not just warmth, but everything he couldn't say. Outside, the storm was over. The air smelled like wet grass. The house looked smaller. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace. I whispered, "Rest easy, sir." And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a formality. They felt like forgiveness. The funeral was 3 days later at a private cemetery in the city. The November air was cold and still. Rows of people in dark, expensive suits stood quietly. Flags hung still. A small string quartet played something slow and sad. I stood in the back, my hands in my pockets. No one there knew who I was. To them, I was just another person paying respects. And maybe that was right. Robert Reed had earned the respect of the business world. His name was on buildings, on charity wings, on scholarship funds. He was a legend. But the man behind the legend had carried a secret. I watched as a man in a priest's collar stepped forward to speak. Robert Reed served his community with vision, his family with sacrifice, and his God with humility. May he find peace. Sacrifice, that word echoed in my head. He had given his company everything, even his daughter. When the service was over, Mr. Davies found me. "Anna," he said softly, "I wasn't sure if you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said. He nodded. "He would be glad you did." He handed me a small velvet box. "He left this for you." I opened it. Inside was a pair of simple, elegant gold cufflinks. On the back, engraved so small I could barely read it, it said, "For the daughter who built her own foundation." My throat tightened. "He had these made years ago," Davies said. "He wanted you to know he always saw you as a peer long before you ever met." I looked at the casket as it was lowered into the ground. Part of me wanted to say something, but my voice wouldn't work. Instead, I just whispered, "You could have just told me." After most of the people had left, Davies and I walked along the path. "You said he had letters," I reminded him. "Yes," he said. "He also recorded something." He handed me a small, plain USB drive. "He made me promise not to show it to anyone but you." I took it. Something told me this wasn't closure. It was something more. Before I left, I stopped at the grave one last time. A new headstone was already there. Robert A. Reed, beloved husband, father, and leader. They had carved father in stone. I wondered if that word would ever feel real. I placed the cufflinks on the grass, then I turned and walked away. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room. The heavy wool blanket was draped over the bed. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. A video file opened. It was my father, sitting at his desk in the study. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. He looked right at the camera. "Anna, if you're watching this, I'm gone." I froze. I never found the courage to say these words to your face. I told myself it was for security, for your protection. But really, it was fear. I was afraid you'd hate me. I was afraid you'd see me not as a father, but as the man who threw your life away. He paused and took a deep breath. I watched you grow into the professional I always wished I could be. Every project, every success. I was there in the shadows. But that's not what I want you to remember. I want you to remember that you were loved. Fiercely, silently. He looked down, then back up. If you ever doubt why I made those choices, look not at what I took from you, but at what you became. You are stronger than the secrets that built you. And if I taught you nothing else, I hope I taught you this. Honor isn't about being perfect. It's about carrying the truth, even when it hurts. He looked down again. Always forward, daughter. Always. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time. The quiet filled the room. Somewhere deep inside me, the anger started to fade. The next morning, I drove out to Lake Michigan. The water was gray and blue. I stood on the pier, the wool blanket in my arms. I unfolded a corner and let the wind catch it. For years, I had lived by my own code, never rely on anyone. I realized now that I'd left a part of myself behind, the part that still needed a father's approval. I folded the blanket back up carefully and held it. This time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an inheritance. That evening, I went to a small, quiet chapel downtown. I sat in the back row and whispered into the silence. You were right about one thing. The truth is heavy, but I can carry it. Then I smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a small, tired smile, the kind that comes when the pain finally starts to turn into understanding. As I left, I passed a donor plaque on the wall. A new name had just been added, Robert A. Reed. Underneath, in small letters, was written, "Always forward." I stopped for a moment, my hand on the cold brass. For the first time, I whispered the words back. Always forward. And in that whisper, something inside me finally settled. 2 weeks after the funeral, the silence felt strange. No deadlines, no meetings, no one asking for answers, just me in my apartment with this new, quiet life. I tried going back to work, but the blueprints seemed less important. The sound of construction outside my window just made me feel restless. The world was still moving, but I was stuck. Then one morning, a package arrived. No return address, just my name, written in that familiar, strong handwriting. Inside was a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a ribbon, and a note from Davies. These were found in the study. He wanted you to have them when you were ready. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated the year I turned 10. I saw your school picture in the local paper. You won the science fair. I wish I could have been there. The next was from when I was 18. You started your internship today. I drove by the building. You looked so serious. That was the day I knew you'd find me one way or another. I prayed that when you did, you would forgive me. Then another. Your first project report came out. Your boss called you tough. You always were. Each page was a confession. I had spent my life wondering why no one wanted me, but he had never stopped watching. By the 7th letter, my eyes were blurry. One letter near the bottom was different. Newer paper. Anna, this one isn't about me, it's about you. There's a fund being set up, the Reed Scholarship for Foster Youth. The paperwork is enclosed. I used my pension to start it. It's yours now. I want you to use it to help others who grew up like you did. Maybe that's how you'll understand that the pain we survive can still serve someone else. I unfolded the documents. It was all there. The legal forms, the charter, his signature. He had turned his guilt into something that could actually help people. For the first time, I didn't just see him as the man who left me. I saw him as a man who never stopped trying to make things right, in the only way he knew how. That night, I drove back to my old neighborhood. The group home was still there, but it had been renovated. The sign out front read, Reed Family Center, established 2016. Inside, the walls were painted bright colors. There was a plaque by the door dedicated to those who are never forgotten. A woman at the desk smiled at me. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I pointed to the plaque. "I just came to see the name," she smiled. "Mr. Reed's daughter, right? He used to stop by. Never stayed long. Just wanted to make sure the lights stayed on." I swallowed. He did more than that. I walked down the hall. I peeked into a playroom. A little girl was drawing a picture of a tall building. She looked up and grinned. "Hi, are you an engineer?" she asked. I smiled. "I am." "Wow," she said, my dad's one too. He's far away." I knelt beside her. "Then you're already brave, you know that?" When I left, the director met me at the door. "We've been meaning to ask if you'd come back someday to talk to the kids. They need to see people like you." I hesitated, then looked back down the hall. "I think I'd like that," I said. Back at my hotel, I read the last letter. It was dated the week before he died. "Anna, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I do ask for understanding. I can't give you back the years I stole. But maybe I can give you something that lasts. When you stand before those children, remember this. They'll look at you as proof that light can survive. Don't let my mistakes define you. Let them remind you what kind of leader never hides from the truth. You were always meant to lead. Always forward, my daughter. Always." I held the letter, and for the first time, I really cried. Not out of anger, but out of release. A few days later, I met with Davies to sign the paperwork for the foundation. He slid the final document toward me. "He wanted you to be the chair of the board." I looked at the signature line, Anna G. Reed, not Walsh, not anymore. "I'll do it," I said. He smiled. "He'd be proud." "I think he already was," I replied. That afternoon, I went back to the small chapel. This time, I brought a framed photo of my father, the one of him smiling, next to my mother. I put it on a shelf. Then I took a deep breath and whispered, "I forgive you, Dad, not because you deserved it, but because I finally understand." The chapel was quiet, and in the silence, I could almost hear his voice. "Always forward." I smiled. "Always forward, sir." That night, I put the last of his letters in a box. I labeled it Legacy. I didn't know what was next for me, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to a story that had finally found its ending. A year passed. The sharp edges of the story had softened. I'd stayed at my firm, but my role had changed. I was now in charge of our community outreach and philanthropic efforts, using my engineering background to build things that mattered, not just things that made money. It was a Saturday in the spring when I went back to Norfolk for a ceremony at the Reed Family Center. The scholarship program had grown. 12 young men and women stood in new suits, all of them former foster kids who were now heading to college for engineering. The director handed me a microphone. "Anna Reed," she said. "The woman whose strength inspired this." I stepped forward. For a second, I just looked at the crowd. I looked at the kids, nervous and proud, and I thought of myself all those years ago, alone and angry. "My father," I began, "was a man who made mistakes. Big ones. He believed that protecting someone meant keeping them in the dark. He thought distance meant safety. But what I learned, what he finally taught me, is that real courage means telling the truth, even when it hurts." I smiled. "You'll learn as engineers that plans and materials matter. But don't forget that integrity is what makes you worthy of building anything at all." He once wrote that honor isn't about being perfect, it's about carrying the truth. I used to think he was wrong about everything, but he was right about that. After, a young woman came up to me. She was barely 19. "Ma'am," she said, I read about you and about Mr. Reed. Can I ask something?" "Of course." Did you ever forgive him? I mean, really? I looked out at the courtyard. Forgiveness wasn't a single event. It was a choice you made every day. Yes, I said softly. I did, because the forgiveness, it wasn't for him. It was for me. She nodded. I think I understand. That evening, I drove to the cemetery. It was quiet. I found his grave. The headstone was simple. Someone had left a small, polished rock on top. I smiled, knelt and placed my hand on the stone. Hey, Dad, I whispered. Your scholarship is working. You'd be proud. The wind blew and a few petals from a nearby tree floated down. I used to hate you, I admitted. I thought you were a coward. But now, I just think you were human. You made an impossible choice, and I finally understand. I reached into my pocket and pulled out his cufflinks. I placed them on the grass next to the stone. The sun was setting. I stood, brushed the grass from my knees, and just stood there for a moment. It wasn't a salute. It was just a daughter standing at her father's grave. As I walked away, a young boy near the gate asked, "Was that your dad?" I smiled. Yes, it was. He must have been a good one. I looked back at the grave, then at the boy. Yeah, I said. He was, eventually. Later that night, I wrote a letter. Not for him, but for me. Dear Dad, I used to think getting even would make me feel strong, but it just kept me tied to the past. Now I see that real strength isn't in anger. It's in peace. You taught me that, the hard way. But you taught me. Wherever you are, I hope you found Mom. Tell her I finally came home. Your daughter, always, Anna Reed. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. A week later, I posted a short message on LinkedIn. Some wounds don't heal with time. They heal with understanding. I learned that forgiveness is the final act of courage. If you've lost someone you never really knew, don't let the silence win. The post got thousands of comments. People sharing their own stories of lost family, of anger, of finding peace. I read every one. And then, as I closed my laptop, I whispered the words that had started it all. The words I'd once heard in complete disbelief and now, finally, in peace. The lawyer called me at work. A small smile touched my lips. The call that had broken my world apart had also been the thing that finally put it back together. I looked out the window and whispered, "Always forward, we're both finally home."